People brand new in an hour. That's after we take a look at the last days of a music icon.
I shouldn't have to deal with what I'm dealing with right now, which is all based on complete lies.
He was adored around the world, yet he died alone. But who was the real George Michael?
He was almost like two different people, really. But what you saw was what you got with George.
Was he a superstar tormented by the attention that fame brought him?
He's probably one of the most private major artists there's ever been.
Or a celebrity obsessed with fighting a war with the tabloid press?
It was an illegal act, and unfortunately, when you're as famous as George Michael, you pay a huge price for it.
We explore his previous battles with drink, drugs, and brushes with death.
Thanking people for saving my life, which is something I've never had to do before. Never wanted to do it again.
And as his family prepare to bury him, we ask, what was the truth about his last days?
George Michael is sat at our next table, right next to us. He just looked poorly.
I don't think you can have George's lifestyle without thinking there is a possibility that he would die young.
Plus the secret about his fortune that's only now come to light.
What I didn't know about him was this incredibly philanthropic side, the stuff that he did. It's mind-blowing what he did.
If this is a lullaby, he's definitely going to have George as a middle name.
George Michael, a very private superstar.
In the present day, my sexuality is being made more of than my music, but my music will last. This rubbish, you know, will be gone.
Christmas Day 2016, George Michael is found dead, alone in bed, at his country home. The death of the 53-year-old superstar prompted a huge outpouring of grief. Tributes also came from musicians and celebrities, none more emotional than his former Wham bandmates, who spoke at the Brit Awards.
A supernova in a firmament of shining stars had been extinguished, and it felt like the sky had fallen in.
George was like a brother to me, and I will always be.
For weeks, fans from around the world have continued to gather at his homes in Goring in Oxfordshire and Highgate in London.
When people say that someone's a soundtrack to your life, George Michael was just totally that to mine. When I lost my dad, you know, Jesus to a Child, me and my mum used to listen to that, and it just really helped us. He's just always meant a lot, and to lose him is just devastating. Just can't believe that he's gone, really.
But George's music wasn't just a soundtrack to his fans' lives. It also reflected the ups and downs of a public star and a private soul. From the carefree teenage years of Wham and their first major hit, Young Guns, to the humiliation of his outing, his arrest for lewd behavior in a Los Angeles toilet, which he satirized with characteristic wit in the video for Outside. George Michael sold 100 million records, among the most iconic, Last Christmas. The video set up the idea of the perfect fantasy Christmas, surrounded by friends, and summed up George's early image. Debbie Killingback played his girlfriend in the video.
Obviously, we used to remember it with fun and happy times, and now with, you know, the passing on Christmas Day of George is going to be completely different.
The last days of George Michael were spent at the home he bought to escape the pressures of stardom. Christmas Eve in Goring, the annual torchlit procession past George's house.
So every Christmas Eve in Goring and Streatley, we have a candlelit procession. We start from either side of the river, a procession of people carrying flaming torches. And last year, on Christmas Eve, as everyone was progressing over the bridge, they saw George looking out of his window, so he was watching.
George died a few hours later, early on Christmas morning. There seemed to have been no warning of what was to happen. George had been planning a Boxing Day meal with friends.
This is George's house, is next door. George Michael's house is just across the Millpool there. I knew him well enough to know his feelings, you know. It was dreadful, it was just dreadful. It was a heart-stopping moment almost when I heard it, and I just thought, well, I just can't believe it, which was such a shame, really, because he loved Christmas, he loved that sort of thing.
I drove back at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I parked my car. I walked down his lane, and all his Christmas decorations were still lit, and nobody was there.
George rarely opened up to the press, but he gave Guardian journalist Simon Hattenstone 2 of his most revealing and intimate interviews.
I don't think you can have George's lifestyle without thinking there is a possibility that he would die young. But yeah, there was a real bleakness to him. There was a sadness to him. I mean, last year was a year when so many great people died. There was no one I was sadder about than George, because you felt he'd died before the time, before he'd had the chance to get his life back in order.
George had planned to spend Christmas with his long-term boyfriend, Fadi Fawaz. But they weren't together when George became ill that night. Fadi, a hairdresser and photographer, had met George 8 years earlier. It was he who found George in bed, tried to rouse him, and then called 999. Fadi told the emergency operator that he'd spent an hour trying to resuscitate George. He said, "He's cold. He's gone." Fadi later said he'd been asleep in his car and found George when he went into the house. A day later, he publicly spoke out on Twitter. "It's a Christmas I will never forget, finding your partner dead peacefully in bed first thing in the morning. I will never stop missing you." Some of George's friends wanted to know why Fadi was in his car that night and why he hadn't called 999 as soon as he found George. Dave Hogan is a celebrity photographer who met George regularly over 30 years and took many of the most iconic pictures of the star.
Well, there goes the tabloid speculation again. Why would you sleep in the car on Christmas Eve when this loved one is in bed on his own? It's sad, you know, that you've got all this money, all this fame, but you died in bed on your own.
There was also newspaper speculation about whether drugs were directly responsible for George's death. If there was a mystery, it wasn't helped by the fact the first tests on George's body couldn't reveal exactly how he died. Although police said it wasn't suspicious, the cause of death was unexplained. Further tests were needed.
Could you move slightly to that way, just slightly? Just so you're not in my vision so much. Yeah.
George's hatred of the press almost became an obsession. His frustration with what he thought was unfair intrusion spanned 2 decades. It spilled out in this TV interview from 2006. Much of it has never been seen before.
You've got a little pair of bunny rabbit ears you could stick there. The press can write what they like in the modern day context of news and use the word source, onlooker, friend. All of these things are indefinable, and they don't have to prove where these things come from.
And the tabloids were as hungry as ever in the days after George's death. Every tweet from Fadi was quoted and analysed. On New Year's Eve, he posted, "I hate you 2016 from the bottom of my heart." Then, a day later, a series of further messages appeared on Fadi's Twitter. The only thing George wanted is to die. He tried numbers of times to kill himself, many times. And finally he managed. We loved each other very much, and we were together almost 24 hours a day. He later said his account had been hacked and he did not send those tweets. In the absence of a confirmed cause of death, the search for clues began to turn to George's well-being over the previous months. Even in Goring, his private haven, he hadn't been safe from tabloid gossip and rumour. Pictures had been taken of him looking sick and bloated in an Italian restaurant.
Well, we arrived, there was a big party of us. We arrived and we sat at this lovely table on the river, overlooking the river. And as I walked to my table, I realised George Michael is sat at our next table, right next to us. And he was quieter than typically normal. He just looked poorly. He looked poorly.
In later months, George would be pictured apparently looking healthier, but he remained hidden from public view. So what was the true state of George Michael's health in the lead-up to his last days?
Madness, madness, they call it madness.
I just want a coffee.
Plain, you see, that is what they mean to me. Madness, madness, I call it madness.
That's £9.
What? McCaffrey. Great tasting coffee.
There you go.
Simple.
Thanks.
Mum thinks they're gonna be stars, so for Mother's Day they made a personalised card. We love you, Mum. Make the perfect card from just £1.79 at
FunkyPicture.com.
Imagine this fantastic website that compares all sorts, not just insurance.
All sorts? Fantastic, Skipper.
Stuff like broadband.
Broadband?
Savings. Energy.
Energy.
Or flights.
Flights? Fantastic idea, Skip.
Go compare. You're quite alright, there's nothing quite like Go Compare. When you want to save it, should be your favorite. Go compare.com is right up there. Yeah!
The average mum gets just 17 minutes to herself every day. So this Mother's Day, treat her to this amazing hand-finished card. This 30-day matured beef. This exquisite collection Shiraz. Oh, and maybe a couple of hours to herself.
Mom, I need a lift to the station.
Aldi, everyday amazing.
I sneeze, there goes my sensitive bladder. Sound familiar? Then you'll love this. Incredible protection in a pad this thin. It's called Always Discreet. The super absorbent core turns liquid to gel for incredible protection, so I know I'm wearing it, but no one else will. Always Discreet for sensitive bladder.
I discovered incredible bladder leak underwear that hugs every curve. Can't tell I'm wearing it, can you? Always Discreet underwear, the sensitive bladder.
Experian know life is full of important steps. And now, Experian Credit Matcher helps you take a next step towards financial control. First, get your Experian credit score, free, forever. Then use Credit Matcher to find credit cards and loans you're more likely to be accepted for. Take the guesswork out of searching for credit cards and loans at Experian.co.uk.
Earn money with your phone and things you no longer need. Buy and sell where and whenever you want. Download now for free. Spot the boot sale app.
Express Wins is the brand new gaming site from the Daily Express with all your favourite games. Join now and get 50 free spins, no deposit needed, and you could win big money.
At Oak Furnitureland, there are huge savings on this real hardwood wardrobe from the original Rustic range. Our 4-day super sale ends Sunday.
Busy day. It can be hard on your skin. Can your moisturiser keep up?
New Neutrogena Hydro Boost, a skin quencher with a hyaluronic-enriched gel matrix that locks in hydration and lasts throughout the day.
For hydrated and supple skin that bounces back.
New Hydro Boost Water Gel. And now, why not ask more from your cleanser? Discover the new Hydro Boost Jelly Milk Cleanser that removes makeup and even mascara while instantly hydrating skin. Neutrogena.
See what's possible.
2 months after George Michael was found dead at his country home, questions were still being asked about what precisely had led to his death. An initial coroner's report was inconclusive. Further tests on his body meant George couldn't be buried. 71 days after he died, a death certificate was finally issued. It revealed that George died of natural causes. The first, a heart condition.
Cardiomyopathy simply means that the heart muscle isn't functioning properly. That can be for a variety of reasons, but it simply means that the heart muscle has thinned and doesn't function as fully as it would normally.
It also revealed George suffered from a fatty liver.
Fatty liver is a change in the liver which indicates that there may be some other health problems. It might be associated with heart problems, it may be associated with somebody who is a smoker, somebody who has alcohol issues.
Did this condition give clues to George's lifestyle in his last few years?
For someone to die at the age of 53 of problems with cardiomyopathy and fatty liver and all the rest of it, there are two possible routes. Either you've got a genetic predisposition, which makes it much more likely that you're going to be damaged, or you're doing stuff that, like cocaine or other drugs that could affect you in such quantities that it's really going to be damaging. So what I find really sad is that someone with that talent, who's given so much happiness to so many people, would die at all of potentially a treatable condition.
A toxicology report, which can reveal the presence of drugs, was not released. It wasn't unusual, and George's boyfriend, Fadi, claimed the truth was finally out. But there was yet more speculation about the last days of George Michael. Even after his death, George couldn't escape what he considered to be his greatest enemy.
I think George would say the press would bear some responsibility for his life and what happened to him, but I don't think it's true. And I think, he was paranoid about Murdoch when he called him the devil once. He said he was evil.
And that 20-year battle really began in a Los Angeles toilet. He was arrested for propositioning an undercover cop. George's sexuality was revealed in the most public way possible.
When he was outed in that toilet, The Sun had a headline called "Zip Me Up Before You Go-Go." I think he felt they were after him. I think he felt the press was out to get him. But I don't think that was the case. I think he provided them with a lot of stuff.
It's a fantastic headline, and it encompasses two things. One, his major hit record with Wham, plus the aspect of the incident in the first place. So it works at a number of levels.
Zip Me Up Before You Go-Go. From a sub-editor's point of view, genius, actually, but from a human point of view, at best, you'd describe it as cheap, and at worst, you'd describe it as actually bullying him because of his sexuality.
The Sun is not adding to his humiliation. He has caused himself the problem. The fact that he becomes a subject of some amusement, actually, he should be pleased about, because the alternative headline is a headline which says, George Michael on sex charge or something.
In a radio interview, George described how he'd felt at the time.
Because I'd already been so globally humiliated. The day that I got arrested in Los Angeles, the beginning of all of this scandal and my coming out, the day that happened, the News of the World and the Sun and the LA police, the day that they actually succeeded in outing me, the Sun newspaper closed down for the afternoon and had a party.
He was talking to radio presenter James O'Brien in one of his last live interviews.
They're just human beings with all the same flaws and foibles that everybody else has. When we write about them, they're not. When we write about them, they're gods and monsters. We write about them as if they're mythical figures, as if they're possessed of a different DNA from the rest of us. And then something like that happens, and a phrase like global humiliation is used to describe it, and you suddenly realise that, if that happened to you, you'd never get out of bed again.
He was caught by a policeman. There's no question of being, quotes, outed, right? He was indulging in something which was, in the United States at that time, illegal.
George Michael was now out as a gay man, but went on American TV to speak of his relief and his determination.
Well, I feel stupid and I feel reckless and weak for having allowed my sexuality to be exposed this way, but I don't feel any shame whatsoever, and neither do I think I should. This is not going to finish me off. This is really nothing.
His way of seizing some kind of control was to use his natural wit to turn humiliation into humour. With a hit record, the video for Outside parodied his arrest. The scene of the crime transformed into a full-on disco, with George dressed as an LA cop.
I mean, what an amazing way to come out, like with Outside. You know, a video and a brilliant song of him being outed by a copper in an LA toilet. It was, I mean, it was so audacious and so funny.
It was just typical of George. Face it head on, let's have a laugh about it. And, I mean, it was funny, and it was brilliantly done.
With his newfound freedom, George went public with his long-term relationship to American Kenny Goss, who accompanied him on tour, as seen on the 2009 concert film Live in London.
Getting into a lift, another lift, in another hotel. Another gripping scene.
George continued to take on the tabloids, in an interview much of which has never been broadcast.
Only thing that's wrong with my life is that I have lived with photographers outside my house and following me around 24 hours a day.
Photographer Dave Hogan isn't a pap, but knows how they work.
Paparazzi basically have no boundaries for, you know, they need a picture. That's how they make their money. There's codes of conduct. You can't trespass, you can't do that. But, you know, those boundaries become blurred. And if the picture's good enough, somebody will run it.
But some argue he brought the headlines on himself.
It's very easy to avoid being photographed. Don't go to the places where you're going to be photographed. Don't do the things that's going to put you there. Don't go to parties where there are loads of people. And no, he didn't do that. He did live as a recluse. But he used to trot up to Hampstead Heath on a fairly regular basis. And the paparazzi knew he was going to do that. So you can't then complain that they're going to take a photograph of you.
The running battle carried on. The News of the World claimed to have caught George in a new sex shame.
Perfectly reasonable front page. Why can't he just simply do it at home? Why didn't he do it there? Why does he have to get involved in potentially upsetting other people walking around the woods or whatever? I don't know. Why?
Once again, George came out fighting.
I've said I enjoy cruising, and cruising now, if you cruise out of sight of the average individual, or an individual who's not involved in that cruising, then you are within the parameters of the law. So one of the many libelous things that's been said about me in the last week is that I've broken the law. I'm not here to defend cruising to people who, as far as I'm concerned, are homophobic and really ought to think about other things. But I'm definitely here to say the law has changed. I'm well within the law, and I should not have to worry about people following me about and jumping out at me with cameras at 2:30 at the side of Hampstead Heath.
I don't think you can complain about the press taking photographs of you if you're cottaging on Hampstead Heath. If you're going to go cottaging, go somewhere where you know the paps aren't going to be. It's almost like daring this stuff to happen to you.
As the papers tired of George's sex life, he believed the tabloids had found a new target on which to focus: his politics. But he refused to duck the big issues.
People didn't really appreciate at the time he was alive was that George was actually quite a political person. In a sense, he had a real sense of social justice. And I think the tabloids, Murdoch, the Mail, offended that sense of natural justice and tolerance.
Shoot the Dog was released in 2002 and satirised Tony Blair and George Bush's decision to invade Iraq.
Shoot the Dog is an incredibly brave record. I had thought, naively, that when George W. Bush was elected president of the United States. Well, at least it'll be good for pop music, because we'll get some good protest records out of this. And guess what? We didn't. But George decides to do a couple anyway.
I think the media got upset when he got involved in politics, when he made that record called Shoot the Dog. It was about Blair and Bush. I think there was a headline in the Murdoch Press that said, do what you're good at, you know, which was not that.
Rupert Murdoch, I understand that this is part of a long campaign that began with Shoot the Dog and what they would call political interference. So I can deal with that. It has a reasoning to it. I can deal with it. What I can't deal with is everybody else enjoying that phenomenon and adding to it.
George's next big battle would be with drink and drugs. A downward spiral which would last for the next few years, and a string of arrests, often when he was at the wheel of his car. Yet his war with the tabloids would also never end.
The media coverage of this case has been farcical, concentrating almost entirely on the prosecution's allegations. In reality, I've been sentenced today on the basis of unfit driving through tiredness and prescription medicines, which I fully accept responsibility for.
You've got to remember, he was smoking 25 spliffs a day, and cannabis can make you a bit paranoid and a bit delusional. I don't think the press were out to get him in the way he thought they would.
I would suspect that everybody who knew George would have noticed the increased role of drugs in his life. And at first, it seemed harmless enough because it was weed. And you remember George said, I'm a stoner. He said it. But then, of course, the pot got stronger and it became almost habitual.
But it wasn't just cannabis. There were heavier drugs. Around this time, Simon Hattenstone managed to get as close to the real George Michael as any journalist had ever done.
There was a report that he'd been cautioned for possession of crack and nothing else. He'd never talked about it. And I said to him, there was this story about you being cautioned for possession of crack. And he said, yeah. And I said, were you taking crack? And he said, yeah, on that day I was.
Tabloid reports claimed George later became addicted. Could a continued use of heavier drugs like crack cocaine have had any influence on his death?
Crack, it does damage the heart. It does damage all sorts of things. It damages the mental processes particularly. You get people just disappearing into the woodwork for days at a time. So crack is a major damaging drug.
In 2010, George was sent to prison after yet another car crash whilst under the influence of drugs. His month inside seemed to act as a wake-up call after the excesses of the past few years. He seemed determined to put his moments of madness behind him and make another new start.
I just want to say thank you to everybody that supported me in there. It's quite inspirational, and I'm coming out here on my own so that you'll realise I just want to start again.
But the personal conflicts and inner demons had dominated George's life and would haunt him until his last days.
Thank you.
What will make this special year truly light up will be the sparkle you'll see in their eyes. Now is the time to live the 25th anniversary. Book now and enjoy up to 30% off hotel and park tickets. Plus, enjoy a free half-board meal plan. Visit DisneylandParis.com.
Persil presents Concentrated Persil Power. Practice makes perfect. But practice makes stains. Persil capsules with powerful stain removal in every spin.
Always keep away from children.
Look at us sitting alone without our users. Can you imagine when we're jogging out in nature? Yep, we've lost control over them. No more liking and sharing.
That's nothing. They've got real friends again, not followers.
And they were helpless, depending on us all the time.
Infuriating. We should have stopped this Red Bull. Everyone knows it vitalizes body and mind.
It's getting colder.
Too late, because Red Bull gives you wings. I think you are now ready to hear what happened 100 years ago. You must save her, my daughter.
Rock your look with my collection. Out now at Dykeman.
Happy Easter. Oh, thank you. But you've eaten its leg.
Oh, it's a bunny. It's supposed to hop.
Maltese bunnies. Catch them while you can.
What is it? It's the breakthrough we've been looking for. 2,000 years old and it's still intact.
This proves all our theory.
We must get it hermetically sealed immediately.
Upon faculty, it's imperative we publish as soon as possible.
Professor, what is it?
Anyone can be lucky, with millions of incredible prizes to win with Monopoly at McDonald's.
The day is done. We play tonight, when the tables turn and the moment is right. We live and we learn, we know that it's real. The sound of the drum, the spin of the wheel. We're the ones who wait, the ones who call, the gathering storm, the rise and fall. Tonight we ride, this is our day. Tonight we'll lie, tonight we play.
The honest player gets up in the morning and looks himself in the mirror and says, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get better.
Be prepared for anything, from front line to back, with the Gillette Fusion range.
Towards the end of George Michael's life, he'd begun to withdraw from the public gaze. If his life in London was a symbol of excess and exposure, then his home in Oxfordshire was all about peace and privacy.
When he first came down, there was paparazzi around, and then gradually people didn't know whether he was here or not. We just thought, let him relax here, which he did. He loved it here.
It was here that George enjoyed spending time with his partner, Fadi Fawaz, who showed off their home and apparently contented lifestyle in these videos on his Facebook page. George Michael was a man of contradictions. He wrestled with his inner conflicts for years. A carefree pop star playing the fame game who became a superstar, desperate to shun the spotlight. George and best friend Andrew Ridgeley exploded onto the music scene with Wham Rap, a song about the realities of life for millions of young people in the 80s.
They wrote this song because Andrew Ridgeley couldn't believe that the government gave him money. So he'd left school, he had no job, he had no overheads, he didn't pay rent to his mum, and the government gave him money. It was, you know, DHSS is the chorus in one of those tracks.
Hey, everybody, take a look at me. I've got street credibility. I may not have a job, but I have a good time with the boys that I meet down on the line. Said DHSS, man, the rhythm that they're giving is the very best.
DHSS is it's hilarious. That's a satire on unemployment benefit.
I say a B1, B2, make a claim, sign your names, all you have to do.
George wanted to be famous. In the early days, he played along with the tabloids he'd later come to hate. Dave Hogan was invited to photograph George a lot, especially in the early days.
Really just, you know, a shy teenager that wanted to be successful but had not tasted success yet, and was prepared to do anything that a photographer was saying.
But in later years, George grew increasingly uncomfortable playing along, a private man living in the public spotlight.
Well, I believe me, I don't want to do this interview. Whenever you see me in front of the camera, the chances are I don't want to be there.
I think he just decided, I've had enough of this. I don't want to play the game anymore. And I was actually with him one day when he did the pictures, and he said, you know what, I don't want to play this game.
He didn't court fame. You know, he would say himself he lived a bit like a recluse. His days were very structured and they were around himself. They didn't involve people. He would get up at 10, he would have his coffee, he'd go across to the studio, he'd come back, and his day wasn't full of people.
There was a point where he says to Andrew Ridgeley, you know, kind of, whose life would you rather have had, mine or yours? And to any outsider, it's almost as if he's taking the piss and saying, look at you and look what's become of me. But actually, it's the opposite. He's saying, isn't it obvious that anyone would pick your life because it's functional, it's normal, it's private?
As Wham became the world's biggest band, another struggle emerged for George. Was he just part of a pop duo or a serious solo artist? Wake Me Up Before You Go Go was a title that would come back to haunt George, but it also became Wham's first #1 single in the US.
In the early days, it was literally like Beatlemania. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, even us backing singers would be ripped to shreds if we allowed ourselves, you know, to face the melee. It was absolutely incredible.
Janie Lee Grace went on several tours with Wham. She says it was clear he wanted to do everything himself.
So although myself and the other singers did all the tours with George, it was so frustrating for us that he never asked us to go and sing on the tracks. I mean, why would you bother to hire anyone else if you're that good?
In 1984, George released his first solo single, Careless Whisper. Despite being written years earlier, it marked a huge change in style. And yet it would take another 3 years before Wham split up and he recorded his first album on his own.
They're longer songs. He's developing, he's taking the time to express more serious adult themes. So he's basically evolving into a different artist. He can't be Wham anymore. He can't be part of Wham anymore.
Faith was a huge hit, selling 25 million copies. But George wasn't happy. He wanted to take control of his career and image. He went toe-to-toe with his record company with the video for Freedom 90, in which he even set fire to the famous Faith jacket.
The Freedom 90 video is a gesture of independence. He's not in it. But if you're not going to be in it, let's make it really interesting by having some of the most beautiful women in the world.
It led to a courtroom confrontation which he lost, but George was eventually released from his contract.
I am convinced that the English legal system will not support Mr. Justice Parker's decision or uphold what is effectively professional slavery.
Yet George's biggest inner conflict, one he'd wrestled with for many years, wasn't to do with music, contracts, or record sales. It was his sexuality.
I think we'd always suspected maybe he was gay, but we couldn't understand why he wouldn't come out as gay. He wouldn't say the 3 words, you know.
I think all his friends would agree that because he'd come from a culture where it was expected that he would be manly, it was very, very much internal struggle, A, to accept one's sexuality, and B, to express it publicly.
He would say, and he said all the time in stories, that until he was 25, 26, 27, he really didn't know who he was.
In 1993, his secret boyfriend of 2 years, Brazilian Anselmo Felipe, died. In 1995, George released Jesus to a Child.
It's about the loss of his lover, Anselmo. It is one of the most beautiful tributes to a lost lover ever.
A public song, but a private tribute. It would be another 3 years before George was forced out. After battling with himself to reveal the real George Michael, he finally found his voice.
He was a very unusual man, George, and I don't think he gave interviews that often, but when he did, he wanted to give really, really good interview. And I think there was something compulsively and obsessively truthful about him. And maybe that goes back to the fact that he had lived what he considered a lie for quite a long time and not coming out.
I am seriously not prepared to defend my community against the misunderstandings of straight people. Here is the reality of my life, and if you're a straight person, you might not understand why it makes me so happy.
George may have been happy, but the turmoil and turbulence in his life would be there until the day he died. And there was one big secret that would only emerge after his death.
Cream conditioner could weigh fine hair down. So we created new Pantene foam conditioner. The strength of our Pro V formula, now in an airlight foam, so it's instantly absorbed. Conditioning hair without the weight. Strong is beautiful. New Pantene foam conditioner.
Sudocrem helps soothe, heal and protect every bit of skin, so you can give it all you've got.
The average mum gets just 17 minutes to herself every day. So this Mother's Day, treat her to this amazing hand-finished card, this 30-day matured beef, this exquisite collection Shiraz. Oh, and maybe a couple of hours to herself.
Mom, I need a lift to the station.
Aldi, everyday amazing.
Intense flavour, yet 30% less fat. New Ritz Bakefuls from the Ritz Bakery. Baked to perfection.
4 Smurfs are headed for a discovery.
Go on.
That will change everything. Expect the unexpected.
Is this safe?
Well, it's a giant crossbow, so I'm gonna go with no. Fire in the hole!
Smurfs, The Lost Village.
Dad, I can't get this plate clean.
Try the scrubbing brush.
Scott, it's not what it looks like.
You were gonna eat him without me, weren't you?
Now the biting makes sense.
Scott's home early.
The day is done. We play tonight. When the tables turn and the moment is right. We live and we learn. We know that it's real. The sound of the drum, the spin of the wheel. We're the ones who wait, the ones who call, the gathering storm, the rise and fall. Tonight we ride. This is our day. Tonight we're live. Tonight we play.
Up to half-price savings on selected spring collection sofas ends soon. The Real Leather Maddox is just $449, but not for long. DFS.
The honest player gets up in the morning and looks himself in the mirror and says, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get better.
Be prepared for anything, from front line to back, with the Gillette Fusion range.
"5 years ago, a newly confident George Michael seemed intent on another fresh chapter. He embarked on what would be his last big tour. It was called Symphonica, accompanied by a full orchestra.
Another one from around that area? Anyone in there? Yep, okay.
Broadcaster Paul Gambaccini hosted the press conference.
I had last seen George when he asked me to host his press conference for his last tour, which was at the Royal Opera House. Now think about it. There's a guy at peak. He's actually holding a press conference in the Royal Opera House. You can't get higher market than that.
I couldn't see myself going out there and doing a big greatest hits show, which was almost entirely, in terms of the way I planned it out, a thank you for the 17 years of absence of touring before that. And so I gave people exactly what I thought they wanted.
Okay, where are we going? Tonight, je suis playing at l'Opéra. L'Opéra.
The tour was filmed by the BBC, who broadcast an acclaimed performance in Paris on the night after George's death.
I'm sorry, I think I'm through. I think I'm through.
But the tour was doomed. The new start became a nightmare. George developed pneumonia in Vienna and slipped into a coma. Even after leaving hospital, it clearly devastated him physically and mentally.
I got streptococcus or something. It's a form of pneumonia. And they spent 3 weeks keeping me alive, basically. I spent the last 10 days since I woke up literally thanking people for saving my life, which is something I've never had to do before, never wanted to do again.
George bounced back, again using humour, in an LBC radio interview.
Apparently, I actually scared everybody the first, obviously, with the illness. But then when I woke up, I spoke, and apparently I did about 2 days stand-up comedy, and the doctors were worried that I had this condition where, you know, some people wake up speaking French or something, some language they learned at school or whatever. Mine was 2 days of this kind of vaguely Bristolian...
Good grief. So it would have been like a Wurzel record, your new single.
Yeah, I could have talked like that all the way through my life.
It shows the private George Michael. It shows the man who woke up in a coma was not a superstar. He was utterly vulnerable, utterly exposed. And then the comical, the sense of humour, the fact that he started speaking in a West Country accent and found that hilarious. And the look on his face as he told the story, the timing, the nuance, he knew how funny it was.
George had always used humour to seize control from his critics, none more so than when he returned to the scene of former scandals. In a Christmas special of the comedy series Extras.
Any action? I've only got 20 minutes, actually. I'm on my lunch break.
Lunch break?
Yeah, I'm doing community service. Are you still doing that? Oh, not that one. No, I'm doing another one now. I'm picking up litter now.
All right. What'd you do wrong this time?
Fly tipping, believe it or not. Right. Yeah, I was helping Annie Lennox out with an old fridge freezer.
There have been rumours since his death that in his last days, George had been planning a comeback tour and releasing new music. Once again, the speculation was firmly quashed by his family.
I'm not disappointed that the songs George may have been working on are not going to be released, because what it says on the tin, written, arranged, and produced by George Michael. George did it all the time. And therefore, anything released based on his scraps would not be representative of his work.
George Michael may not have left new music, but he did leave an estate, estimated at £100 million. Most of this is expected to be left to his family and godchildren. His boyfriend Fuddy has continued to live in George's Regent's Park house. It's not known if he was left anything in George's will.
I think celebrity estates are often a target for a lot of public interest, potentially claims to an estate. And there may be people that could make a claim based on whether they were financially dependent on the person who passed away.
In the week since his death, one of George Michael's biggest secrets has been revealed. For years, he'd been giving millions of pounds to those in need, almost all of it anonymously. It's forced many of his critics to reassess how they see him.
I view him entirely differently now. since he's died, because I didn't know that much about him. I knew what I read, I knew what was in the papers, I knew what he put out there. What I didn't know about him was this incredibly philanthropic side, the stuff that he did. It's mind-blowing what he did.
I did know from many years ago, in the early Wham days, that he was running a charity. I don't know how it slipped out, but it slipped out in conversation with one of his sisters, and then they swore me to secrecy. Don't ever say anything about it. And I remember thinking, wow, that really is impressive, because, you know, everyone knows the old saying, oh, I do a lot of charity work, but I don't like to talk about it. But he really didn't.
I think what often happens with people, especially famous people, when they're alive, you hear all the time about what they're giving, their generosity, and somehow, even though they don't want to talk about it, it manages to get out. With George, it was the opposite way around. He had loads of critics, loads of people didn't like him, and yet all the stories that came out afterwards were ones that made him bigger and bigger.
One charity that was very close to George's heart is the Thalassemia Society, which treats people for an inherited blood disease.
I have thalassemia, which means I have to have regular blood transfusions due to the lack of red cells that our bodies don't make.
At the beginning of the Thalassemia Society's existence, it was started by mainly a bunch of Greek Cypriots. And George Michael, being a Greek Cypriot, obviously heard about our initiatives and what we were trying to do.
Due to his contributions, that we can have a better quality of life. It makes us feel happy, obviously, that if there's generous people like this that can give it, that can prolong our life, that without these treatments or things we wouldn't have. If you go back so many years ago, they used to tell you, oh, you won't live past 35, or you won't live past 30. But now, with all research and new meds, that people are living as long as anybody else.
But George Michael's legacy is not only in saving lives, he also used his wealth to try to create new ones. Watching TV in his London home, he saw a man fail to win enough money on a game show to pay for a round of IVF. So he stepped in.
So as soon as the show was aired, literally the day after, we was out shopping, got a call from the producers at Deal or No Deal just to say that we'd had an anonymous donor donated £9,000.
On Boxing Day, it was revealed the donation had in fact been from George Michael.
It's just been amazing, just amazing that he watched our show and we touched him so much that the next day he actually rang in and wanted to donate money to us. That's just amazing.
8 years later, and after several failed rounds of IVF, Lynette's dream of becoming a mum is about to come true.
So I am now 15 weeks pregnant. And if this is a little boy, he's definitely going to have George as a middle name.
George's final resting place is believed to be in a grave next to the most important woman in his life, his mother, in Highgate Cemetery in London.
I find that must be a real source of comfort for his family, that, you know, he'll be with his mum. And I know that's probably what George would have wanted.
George's mother, Leslie, died 20 years ago, but George was touched by the care she received in hospital from NHS staff. And a decade later, gave a free concert for nurses at the Roundhouse in London.
Basically, we were there singing, dancing, really enjoying ourselves.
This footage was filmed by one of the concert girls.
Particularly as it was coming up to Christmas, it was the 20th of December, and then Last Christmas came on, because he didn't really perform that very much. They had all this fake snow as well coming down towards the end of the song, and everybody was singing their heart out. It was really, really great. It was such good fun. It's nice to be recognised, because nurses, you know, it's a difficult job, and yes, we do get paid for it, so we shouldn't expect extra recognition. But it was very nice, because somebody was looking at us as heroes because of the care that we'd given, or some nurses had given, to George's mum. So it was really nice to be recognised as something special.
I absolutely salute you for what you do.
100% me saying thank you to you, okay?
George continued to offer free tickets to nurses for the rest of his career. George Michael lived a life of enormous highs and desperate lows. A global superstar who shunned the limelight. A man who fought the tabloids for 20 years and battled his own demons until his last days.
I think now people will remember him. I think the things he did in his life for other people would be remembered just as much as his music.
When I was raising money for the Terence Higgins Trust, George gave $50,000, and he did it anonymously.
I think he's got to be remembered as one of the best songwriters of our generation. On stage, he entertained everybody all the time.
I think he should be remembered as a brilliant musician who brought a lot of happiness to a lot of people.
He was smart, he was witty, someone who was prepared to reshape agendas. You know, to say, no, I don't have to be like this to be a gay man. I can be as out there as you want.
And a man who had a sense of what he wanted his own legacy to be.
Well, in the present day, my sexuality is being made more of than my music, but my music will last. This rubbish, you know, will be gone.
She body scrubs for 4 hours a day just to survive her rare condition. In Nellie's inspiring story here on Channel 5, as we meet the snakeskin woman in brand new Extraordinary People next.